Hey, folks, welcome to Travers Talks, and I'm your host, Jim Horn. This is the podcast digging into people and the decisions shaping Grand Traverse County. Today, we're talking with attorney Brace Kern, who represents the neighboring landowners fighting the county's transfer of Twin Lakes Park to Long Lake Township. A dispute now tangled up in a 1941 deed restriction, two separate lawsuits, and a county board that ignored its own warnings for a decade. Hey, so let's get into it with Brace. Okay, Brace, it's good to have you on the show. Welcome aboard, I guess. Yeah, welcome aboard. We got a lot of lakes out here, so I could say welcome aboard, right? How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I appreciate you coming back on the podcast. I think it was a little over maybe a year ago or so that you were on the podcast and we talked about the Twin Lakes issue, their Twin Lake Parks issue. I guess that's the proper way to refer, and it continues to be ongoing. And so let's talk a little bit more and bring the folks up to date. I think it's probably about time. You guys had, and when I say you and the plaintiffs, you sent a complaint to the county board. And did you guys give them any kind of specific timeline to return Twin Lakes Parks, or some kind of legal action, or what is the status with that timeline and where are you guys at?
We didn't establish any kind of timeline. What we did was reach out to the county to notify them. First of all, there's more plaintiffs than there used to be. More neighbors have jumped on board and want to compel the county to take back ownership of Twin Lakes Park. So in any pre-suit negotiation, you kind of want to reach out to the other side and ask if they have an interest in settling it without litigation, That's what the letter was asking for, and a copy of the complaint in order to show them that we're further along than just a letter to say, do you want to talk? This is your last chance before it turns into litigation. Again, I don't, where is the status now? I mean, the county held a meeting and they said that they'd sit down with the plaintiffs in Long Lake Township, and we didn't hear from them. And when I say we, I mean, nobody reached out to me to discuss the issue. And then Long Lake Township put it on their agenda to have a board meeting, and they voted the opposite of the county, saying that they didn't want to sit down with the plaintiffs or the county and talk about resolving it. And I haven't heard anything since then from either of them. So certainly the issue of when does their time to talk to us run out before filing suit has become something that needs to be defined. And I'd say we have a couple more weeks for them to try to reach out, or I'll reach out again and say, is that the extent of it? You just vote on behalf of the county to have a conversation, which you said was the plaintiffs in Long Lake Township. But if they had a conversation, it looks like it would have only been with Long Lake Township because it hasn't been with us.
What kind of outcome are the clients looking for? A return of the land, financial compensation, something else?
Yeah, no, we don't want any money. This isn't about that at all. It's, yes, we want the county to take back possession of the park because what we want is compliance with the deed restriction. That's what protects the park. Okay. What we're doing is trying to prevent that park from becoming privately owned. And that's where we see this is going if it's not stopped right away. So you take a public park that is a deed restriction saying it must be a county park, and you transfer it to a municipality who has lesser financial capabilities of taking care of it. All right. After they received it, they had to be paid $125,000 by the county just to take it, to float a number of years of their usage or expenses. And then Long Lake Township has already said they can't afford it. And they've started a fundraiser seeking $300,000 to try to raise those funds. And if it weren't for our lawsuit, we don't think they would have even done the fundraiser route. They would have just added it as a millage onto the ballot to say, here, we have Long Lake Township owning this park now. You, the Long Lake Township residents, have to pay for it, but it's up to you. You decide. Now, what happens if the Long Lake Township residents first say, okay, sure, we'll pay for it. But after a couple millages, they say, it's on for a renewal millage. And the Long Lake residents say, we don't want to keep paying for this. Why do we have to pay for this? Wasn't it supposed to be the county? They start remembering back and wondering why the bill got so high. And then they don't pass the millage. So then Long Lake Township says, well, it appears the people no longer want the park because they're not willing to pay the millage. So we're going to go ahead and let it revert back to the heirs of the judge. And now and when that happens, I imagine it'll just be so coincidental that somebody's like, oh, you know what? We happen to have a buyer who's ready to buy the whole park from that family, who's going to get this big lump inheritance that was never meant for them. So what we want is the park protected from privatization. And this is just one step towards taking it from who was properly supposed to own it and fund it and who was financially capable of doing it and who did do it for 80 years and give it to somebody who can't afford it. So then it can be lost to privatization and bought by a developer.
What's the exact language of the 1941 deed restriction? Do you remember what that is?
Let's see. The relevant part says, these lands so conveyed to Grand Traverse County as a county park to be owned, improved, and used as such, and for recreation purposes. So it's conditional ownership, right? It's a donation of land for the county as trustee to hold on to and maintain these conditions. And in the event that the conditions are not complied with, then it reverts. And then it goes to his heirs who get to recover it, and it gets into privatization. So it specifies owned, improved, and used as a county park, not public park, county park. And we know that the donor, Judge Parm Gilbert, knew what he was doing when he used the word county park, because he already donated a park to the township. In 1925, which is 15 years before Twin Lakes Park was donated by him, he donated a beachfront park to Long Lake Township called Gilbert Park. And in that one, he said, these premises are hereby dedicated as a public park forever and are at all times to be under the control of and policed and cared for by the township board of said township as such public park, and are now designated as Gilbert Park. So he already gave the township a park, and he specified in that one public park. When he gave 15 years later, when he gives the county Twin Lakes, he specified county park, and it was much bigger. He wasn't giving them a small couple acres that Gilbert Park was. He was giving them a bunch of land that was going to require funds and stewardship. And he trusted the county, and he was a county judge. So we're really lucky to have him to have donated parks to both the township and the county to demonstrate his intent was specific as to who was to have what.
So, and I don't want to throw shade on her, and I don't know the relevance of this after you reading that document. His granddaughter, Heather Cartwright, says the family believes the transfer is consistent with his original intentions, although after you just read that, I don't quite understand, how they read that into it. It's obvious from what you just read, it was supposed to be a county park, right? How does she fit into the whole deal, or does she at all?
Well, who can speak to somebody else's intent? The law doesn't allow you to do it. In court, you can't tell what somebody else's intent was. What you can do is present evidence to show possibly what their intent was. So what's her evidence? I hear her say, I speak for the whole family. That's not binding. And where's the rest of the family? None of that has, take it from this point. She stands to inherit it if the deed restriction is violated, her and her entire family, right? So I'm not about to take the word of somebody who, if it just happens to get violated, I inherit it. So there's a history to her speaking up too. At this last meeting, the last county commission meeting, there was a bunch of people who took to the mic. There was former Parks and Rec director, and Lisa Korn, who's a former Parks and Rec board member, who's currently on the road commission. And she went into explaining that she tried to get the park transferred previously. That they claimed the county was not able to afford it, and they were looking for other uses in order to be able to keep it. And one of her suggestions, as she said in the public comment, was to use it as a veterans rehabilitation facility. And that led to the legal opinion that says you can't use it for anything but a county park. So at that time, though, my understanding is that Heather Cartwright and the family was threatening the county, saying, if you do this, we're going to enforce the deed restriction and take the park back. So what I see is that she represents a family who has already expressed its intent at one time or another to take the property back from the county through enforcement of their reversionary clause. That means somebody's standing ready to privatize that place, in my eyes. And I want to make sure, the only way to make sure that that doesn't happen is that the deed gets complied with. So right now, it's not being complied with, and that the Long Lake Township has it, right? Despite what she says at public comment, any one of her relatives that stand to inherit it can bring an action against the county, Long Lake Township and the county, and say, I'm enforcing the reversionary clause because you violated the deed by transferring ownership away from the county to the Long Lake Township. So there's a perverse incentive from the heirs to get the property back if the deed restriction's violated. So I use evidence to point to judges' intent, the donor's intent. And like I said, we're very lucky that we have two deeds, one that he gave to the township and he specified public park, and one he gave to the county and he specified county park. That, to me, as a lawyer, shows clear intent that the person knew what they were doing and who was to receive it. I don't know what her evidence is based off of.
Graham's, and I'm not sure, David Graham's, I'm not sure who he is. And I know who Deputy Administrator Chris Forsyth warned the commission in 2014 and 2017 that the property couldn't be transferred without waivers. And Kay Graham said the prosecuting attorney's office flagged the same issue in 2014. Have you guys got those documents, or are they on the you do?
It's a legal opinion. Yes, we received them from a Freedom of Information Act request before we started the lawsuit, in which we discovered that. So, from what I was just speaking about is when Elisa Corn said that when she was a member of the board of Parks and Rec, that they were trying to convert it to but add the use of a veterans rehabilitation clinic. That's what I think she was explaining prompted that prosecutor's legal opinion, saying, can the park be used for another purpose, or would this be another purpose? And so Chris Forsyth at that time was in the prosecutor's office, and his name is on the opinion, as well as Bob Cooney, who is the judge now in district court. He was the prosecutor at the time. Those are the two, county attorney and deputy county attorney, prosecuting attorney and deputy prosecuting attorney, who authored the legal opinion saying that Twin Lakes could not be used as anything other than a county park without the neighbors executing waivers. So now, and they're transferring it without the waivers and in their own legal opinion. So you asked me, the relevance to that is we can point it out publicly. We can say, look, their lawyers told them you can't do this, and these politicians are doing it anyway. But in court, it doesn't matter. That's just a legal opinion of one lawyer, albeit their own lawyer. So it doesn't have any binding impact on the county, unless it could be seen as an admission on their behalf.
Well, the county board just voted a couple of weeks ago to authorize the administrator and the civil counsel to discuss a possible resolution with you guys. Were you in the room at all, or informed of the closed session discussion? And what would a settlement need to include for your clients? And I think you just said it a little bit earlier. Hey, we just want this thing back where it was, right? County takes over the park, and am I correct on that? That's what you really want to drop the litigation.
Yes, I was at the meeting. I don't have the benefit of seeing what happened during the closed session, but I was there to listen to the public speak and to watch the commissioner's response. Then they went into closed session, came out, and voted to have a communication or have a sit down of some sort. But that hasn't happened. And you said, what does it take from my clients that what would a settlement look like? Yes, we want them to take it back, but I think Rob Henshaw was one of the first commissioners to say, even if we have to take the park back, we're just going to lease it to Long Lake Township. Okay, no problem. You can do that. As far as we're concerned, as long as it as long as the deed restriction is being complied with. You got to own it, you got to improve it, and you got to use it as a county park. Doesn't mean you can't use the Long Lake Township as a management company to handle it for you if you'd like. So if they want to keep it in the physical hands of the township in terms of being on premises, no problem. But the paper trail needs to be in compliance with the deed restriction.
You know what, a couple of one of the interesting things is, and this is a little bit speculative, Commissioner Nelson was the lone no vote on this whole thing. Any insight?
Well, Henshaw wasn't there. Go ahead.
Pardon?
So that's because Henshaw wasn't there, but go ahead.
But I was going to say, is any insight into the objection? Why would he care, right? I mean...
let's take a look at his history of voting, okay, just on this issue. He voted, so did Commissioner Henschel, to transfer ownership to the township, claiming at the time that it was too expensive to maintain. I believe here was the language was, they cited the average annual cost of running Twin Lakes Park, $31,000 for the years of 2016 through 2021, right? And then they cited another number of $47,700. But they said the average annual cost of running it from 2016 to 2021 was $31,000. Okay? And that they were transferring it to Long Lake Township because that was too expensive. That was in March of 2022, I believe it was. Fast forward not even 2 years. And guess who's spearheading the purchase of Greeley Park? Daryl Nelson for $3 million. So how do you have the money of $3 million to buy a new park when you don't have the $31,000 a year to run the existing one you have? Let's look at its location. Twin Lakes Park is the only park on the west side of the Boardman River. There isn't another one over there. All right. The rest of them are all on the east side. Henschel and Daryl Nelson are the two guys that are vehemently opposed to keeping Twin Lakes Park, but totally supportive of Greeley Park, which just happens to be in their backyard. So I see two guys selfishly voting for their own interests at the downfall of the rest of the county because they don't care. They only care about what they want. And now the bigger question is, why doesn't the representative from the county in our area on the west side stand up for the only park left, Twin Lakes? Ask her that question.
Yeah, I haven't. Morris voted for to talk to you guys and so forth.
She did vote to talk to us, but she also voted for the transfer.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Okay, one final.
So you asked me. I don't understand. You asked me how do I resolve that inconsistency of Daryl Nelson? He's voting against it when he votes for $3 million to go to a park on his neck of the woods. Him and Henschel just say, "Oh, it's a totally different animal," and then they point to the Parks and Rec director and say, "Oh, because of the skills of that guy, that's what makes it different." Doesn't pass the sniff test.
Well, if I remember correctly, on Graylickville, it was there was like $3 million. That was ARPA money. That was the ARPA money, that funds that they took. Which, if I remember correctly, and I'm paraphrasing this, it was sort of like funny money. It was government money. It's not a big deal, right? We can just, of course, you could use that ARPA money some other place, right?
Well, we offered them the opportunity to take the park back when they had ARPA money, right? So you could have used the money that way. Said, now we're well funded, we have the money. But then the idea that they couldn't afford $31,000 a year for a park is ridiculous. No park brings in more money than Twin Lakes Park because of its rental to other programs. And that's that's the other people harmed by the transfer, is that, the deed also says, or for recreation purposes. And in the context of understanding what the judge donated back then, he wanted the park used for youth activities. There was a Camp Royale back then, which was for disabled children to use it. And the Boys and the Girl Scouts had access to it. And 4-H was one of the big ones that he wanted involved in and provide with access. And YouthWorks is a great one now that was using it significantly during the time of the transfer process. And the motion to transfer it was even required by the county to protect YouthWorks' current existing contract, 3-year contract, so that they wouldn't be pushed out. And Long Lake Township likes to say that they weren't pushed out because we offered them an opportunity to renew their contract, but they didn't want it. And it's because they didn't want the conditions that Long Lake Township was putting on it. They were offering them too short of an opportunity, so they couldn't commit to it. longer term. So you can't say, oh, we still made it available to YouthWorks if you make the terms unreasonable for the other party so that they won't contract. And so YouthWorks got pushed out of there. That was one thing that was specifically not meant to be squeezed out as a program, and it's gone.
Okay, if you guys prevail, any change in the Twin Lakes Parks day-to-day operations or anything like that? I mean, you guys goes back to the county, and the county, John Chase, I think he handles the parks too, besides other duties. He just takes it over again, and the clock starts anew, right? Is that correct? If you guys,
I mean, the deed would be back in compliance if they take back ownership of it, such that now we don't fear privatization. And whatever they want to do with the day-to-day is up to them. Nobody says that they couldn't, so long as you own, improve it, and use it as a county park. So if they want to not fund it, they can not fund it. If they want to hire a management company to manage it, they can do that. If they want to lease it to Long Lake Township, they can do that. But I don't think the day-to-day is going to change much from the camp. And that's one of the things that the public have been asking, saying, well, what's the big deal if the day-to-day doesn't change? And it's the risk of loss to privatization. This looks like the beginning of a slope to where it's lost. The people who stand to inherit it are going to later enforce the deed restriction even if it's not her. So you say the current existing heirs. Well, the next generation can do it. That isn't even around yet. I mean, anybody that's in their family that says, you know what, I want a big payday, I'm going to go do it. And we told the county, this is a risk you run. That, do you know, and if the county faces a lot of backlash because it's going to go to privatization, the county may end up having to try to buy it back to beat out that developer's purchase price and end up giving the heirs of Judge Gilbert some big payday just to get it back under county ownership again. How foolish would that have been? So we're just trying to avoid it from turning into a privately owned thing. And when you take it from a well-funded agency in which it was intended to be held by, and you give it to an underfunded municipality to take care of it, and it allows the deed restriction to be violated such that anybody who has a financial interest can force the sale of it. That's the opposite of what we want. We want to get rid of that possibility from happening. And that's why I say we don't seek any financial contribution or reimbursement or anything. These people are acting, the heirs, we talk about the heirs and the neighbors and how they're different. The heirs, if the restrictions violated, they get it. They get the property. They inherit it. The neighbors don't get squat. The neighbors get a new neighbor that isn't a county park. So they are committed to preserving their neighborhood and saving the park from privatization. That's the primary focus.
I get it. And I think the listeners will too. I think this is great. Great conversation. Brings us up to date. I think it provides a lot of additional information that people either may not have paid attention to or wasn't necessarily available. Brace, as I said, I appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking about this and taking time and explaining it. I certainly walked away with some additional information, on the privatization part. I wasn't totally aware of that, that component and how that could sort of transcend into that particular situation. And that wouldn't be good either. Well,
look at it from Long Lake Township's say, why would Long Lake Township want to lose it? Right? Like if they took it over and they're supposed to be as good of stewards as the county, how are they different? Well, Long Lake Township receives real estate taxes. So if that park is no longer a park and it gets developed, they get 176 acres of brand new lots, including waterfront, to tax. And how much does that increase the tax roll of Long Lake Township? So there's a perverse incentive for both Long Lake Township to have it privatized so they can add to their tax rolls, and there's a perverse incentive from the heirs to pretend they don't care about the deed restriction being violated until they step in and do to take it back. My clients have no perverse incentive at all. They're spending their own hard-earned money just to keep a county park and keep the donation the way it was. That's one of the most troubling things is that if you've ever heard of monkey justice, it's this concept where we have this inherent fairness built into us, where they have a test between two monkeys and they like grapefruit and they like nuts. And if you give the monkey a coin and he gives it back and you give him a grapefruit, you do that 3 times and the other monkey sees it. When you give the coin to the other monkey and he hands it back and you give him a nut, although he likes nuts, he doesn't want it. He goes and throws it at you and he sulks in a corner because he saw that he was supposed to get a grapefruit and you're treating him unfairly by giving him a nut. And that's the concept that has been described as this inherent fairness that we feel as human beings, that when that sense of justice is violated, you'll act irrationally with your dollars, perhaps even to promote fairness. And everybody knows that the judge wanted this park to be a county park. And there was an attempt in the 2000s to transfer it, which my understanding is it's Herb Lemcool, Ron Lemcool's father, who was the supervisor, I think, of the township back then, who was spearheading this. And it didn't happen because a senator at that time stood up and said, if you do this, you're going to be fighting me as well. And I was there when the judge dedicated this and when the roads were paved, and this is what he wanted. And so they backed off that effort 20-something years ago. And then here we are again with history repeating itself. The same family line, if you ask me. So you can't follow all that with just news articles. You know what I mean? Politics are hard to follow. You have to get the information from the people who have it. And the neighbors have a bunch of it.
Well, once again, thank you for shedding a lot of light on this. People are going to really appreciate it. And I appreciate it.
Well, thank you as well. I mean, you're doing it. You're shedding light on it. One of the reasons you asked me, why did I send them a letter? Because we got to keep it in the public conversation. If I just filed the suit, they don't talk about their lawsuits publicly. So you can't continue that conversation. You can't get the people involved as much. So thank you for taking the issue up to help. Because over the years, the number of people in the suit have increased, the number of people showing support of it have increased, and the number of people understanding why it matters has increased.
Well, you take care. Have yourself a great week, sir.
Thanks, Jim. You too.